Welcome back to the Fixed Ops Roundtable. I'm Sarah Vantine here with Ted Ings. Today we have the Axel Automotive panel, and Ted, lots of exciting things when it comes to bringing control of your critical operational data back into the dealership.
Sarah, you're so right, so true. Prasad Chavali is with us. He's the CEO of Axel Automotive, great friend of the retail community. Prasad, welcome back to the Fixed Ops Roundtable.
Thank you. And good to see you guys again.
Yes, it was great to see you earlier in the year in Las Vegas at NADA, amongst other friends who were attracted to the conversation as well. And Prasad, congratulations. A lot of great talk, a lot of things happening with Axel Automotive. What are you seeing in the industry right now since we all got together at NADA? And what are some of the things that have been happening in terms of activity, especially on the fixed ops side?
You know, Thank you again. The activity at NADA has been great. Your people came by the booth, asked us some questions. It got a lot of buzz. We met in person. With Joe Shaker and everybody. Uh, there's nothing more, you know, y- fruitful than meeting people in person. So we enjoyed the show, and we did over 30 demos during the 2.5 days in our booth. So it was really good for us, and we're still working with those relationships. But also from there, people ask us a question: Can you do this? Can you do that? And it keeps changing. From Cincinnati DA, we onboarded at least another 6 groups, and we're still working through the residuals from there. So when we sign a new customer, we do something called a discovery meeting. We ask them, "What's your pain point? What are you looking for?" Because there is no one reporting platform or one solution that fits everybody, right? And in the last 30 days, everybody's like, "Okay, our management wants to look at our expenses. We want to make sure how much money we're making exactly from our fixed ops side. Is our parts department, are we actually doing pricing metrics correctly?" So when we start talking about it, you, you guys are aware that service absorption, service department takes care of, our fixed department takes care of the whole expenses, right, to begin with. So it's the um, lifeline for the dealership. Everybody knows that. So that's one of the reasons fixed ops data is so much more important. It may not be the most glamorous one all the time. Everybody wants to do ads and sell and all that, but who pays for the bills? It's the fixed ops side. So we started building the reports on the fixed ops sides to say, what is your exhaustion? How much money you're making from fixed ops that's covering your expenses? What's the benchmark? What is NADA recommends it to be? Are you compared to others? That report, almost everybody we talked to said, I would really like to have a pulse on it. You know, People kind of put it together. Some people actually look at a financial statement and kind of make a few calculations, say, okay, I'm in the range. But to see it front and center, almost in real time, will create some awareness on where you're doing and where you need to focus on. So that's been a very uh, fruitful thing to kind of talk about. The second one is obviously expense control, right? In March, there were a few ups and downs in the industry. There may be not as much gross profit. So what is the first thing everybody's going to turn into? Is what am I spending money on? Are we actually watching it? What is the trend? In our last conversation, we talked about our AI product actually looks at all the data and starts to learn things, right? It's not a public AI. It's actually looking at the dealership data and say, are you consistently spending the same amount of money for the same category and down to the each individual line item in financial statement? So a guy asked me, hey, are we spending more for our uniforms or less? I was like, where do you go look for that data? So you had to go into the DMS, look up a line item and which vendor you're paying. These are simple questions, but if you don't have access to the data, you can just answer that right away. And so when somebody asks me, can you give me a fixed uh, income and expense statement that shows me exactly the money and expenses by category, we built that, and they started going clicking on each line and down to the entry level. And they actually had a meeting at the dealership with all their service guys and say, not that we have to change anything, but let's be aware of everything we're spending. And that was very eye opening for us. It's like how dealerships that really operate well keep eye on their expenses, how much money they're making, and we're glad to be providing those numbers for them.
Prasad, what I think is so fascinating about the story that you just shared with us is that, oftentimes dealerships are held captive by the data that they can uh, glean from the reporting that's available to them. And like you said, it is very complicated if a general manager or service director is trying to, quickly interpret this information. What you just described with the uniform expense, in some cases, if maybe you're not exactly sure what line to check or in the reporting, you're sending a message off to your office. You're having more of those conversations between other employees to ascertain the information. And what gets lost in that moment is all the time it takes to gather that information. And so that's a really amazing story. And I'd love to get more insights from you on what people are focused on when it comes to data, currently. And what are you seeing more and more conversations evolving to when you're talking to dealership decision makers?
It's so true. Like you said, the amount of time it takes for them to look up that number. Like when the owner calls the GM and says, "Hey, how are you doing? How much are you spending?" He's always like, call some other number. They look it up and come back, and it may be by evening. And I don't think they have the patience in this day and age. Everybody's like want a 30-second reel. Give me like a insight of everything you're spending, and if you can give them the numbers quickly, you know they all get impatient, right? So I was talking to one of the GMs and said, yes, every time I had to ask either my controller, not that it's a bad thing, they're busy month end, and somebody else has to log into another system and type in a few things and give us the number back. And so when we go looking at all these dealership and say, what are the numbers anybody's going to ask you? How quickly can we access that, knowing that it's your data? And no, we don't knock on any of the current software. It's like the DMSs are there to help you, but not everybody's well versed with the DMS. They can just log in and punch in a few keys and say, "I know exactly what that cost is." So for us to start to almost normalize that data and keep it at their fingertips, it's almost like the best outcome, right? They're all looking and say, wow, I can look at this expense by my vendor without having to ask for a report or call somebody to say, hey, can you run this for me? People are becoming more data aware, right? And AI put that in forefront. Like if it's like, hey, you don't know that number, it's almost like nobody wants to admit that I don't know that number. So I better make sure that I have quick access to it. So, so I keep making notes of what data that, somebody will ask you, right? Especially expenses. How much did you do last year? Are we doing year over year better? It's mostly common questions, but you need quick access to it rather than having to worry about, oh, I will get back to you tomorrow.
Yep. And Prasad, it's amazing how the conversations evolve throughout the course of the year. Fixed ops and expense control are in the front and center. I want to pivot a little bit because when we got together in Las Vegas, there's been a whole lot of talk at that NADA show about AI. I don't know about you, but Sarah and I couldn't turn either way without hearing about AI. What are you experiencing? What has the talk been since the show? And is AI showing inroads and progress, especially on the fixed op side?
you know there is always that newness with AI. Everybody looked at it, and a few people signed up to it. But at the end of the day, if you're paying for AI, you're going to ask the same thing. We're talking about expenses. If I sign up to another software that does AI, where is it helping me? Right? You have to show the results. So just because it's a new technology, you can't keep going on signing up with software and say, this AI is going to revolutionize it, right? Maybe down the line. So what become more aware since NADA, the AI with the right data and giving the answers quickly is where everybody's pivoting to. Just because it says AI doesn't mean that you can just buy the software or start expecting miracles. So it needs to know the data, especially on the fixed op side. Do you think you can feed all the auto data to AI and then it will tell you what to do? Right? We're talking about years and years of expertise that the people in the industry in the fixed ops side know exactly what the pulse is, right? How do I actually make a small difference in my effective labor rate? All these things are not going to be fed into AI. So it comes to the knowledge of the industry and the data that actually means to give the right answer. So we found people like, okay, yes, I'm going to embrace AI, but I'm also going to embrace it slowly while I still have control on everything we're doing. So we fed more data. One of the things like a guy said is, where AI can help me is to fix my pricing metrics, right? I said, what do you mean by that? And said, we discount anything over $10 on a part. But if AI can look at all the data and tell me if I'm discounting too much for a product that is $11 versus $9, all I have to do is small change and nobody will notice difference. And if AI can tell me that means another $100,000 in gross for you with just that one change, I will grab that. That is what I'm expecting AI. So some of the best operators are actually expecting a lot from AI. It's not just give me a fancy answer and then I'm going to be happy with that. So they want AI to analyze the data deep and wide.
Prasad, it's so incredibly fascinating to hear, again, all the different layers that dealerships and fixed ops departments are considering. I'm curious to get your interpretation on what's happening industry wide, because Ted and I at the Fixed Ops Roundtable, there's a lot of dealers and a lot of general managers from different OEM brands, different size dealerships, different market areas. But what are you seeing industry wide? What areas are dealerships most focused on when it comes to fixed operations today?
People want to buy more cars coming to the service department. Everybody like service drive acquisition has been a area that everybody wants to focus on, right? There's a lot of software around it. There's a lot of talk about around it, but you're competing with everybody, all the big boys and online guys to buy cars, right? So
Yes.
fixed ops is actually helping the variable by getting more cars for you to sell. So I asked people and said, what are the areas that you want us to help? That's the other area they tell you. It's like, how can we actually start figuring out buy cars from our existing customers? Those seems to make the most money, right? And it's like instead of buying off the street. So
Right.
it's full circle. You can buy car online, but you cannot service online. You still need to take it to a dealership or have to have a mobile service. And I'm also seeing almost every group I'm talking to, they all now doing mobile service, right? It's like, especially in California, people are busy. I'm taking the van to the customer. I'm not expecting them to come here.
Right.
And I want to see how much money I'm making. It's like you cannot again have a big number in a financial statement at the end of the month. You need to start preparing for, do I need to get more people in that department and start making more money? Uh, just like all the fixed ops metrics, how much money we're making, are we just doing oil changes? I started seeing people asking all these questions and say, wow, it is changing, right? Fixed up is still driving the revenue. You are adjusting to the demands of the market. You want to be available for anybody. And as people start buying more and more cars online, where are they going to go? Especially if it's an investment. If you buy a car 40, $50,000, you're not going to take it to anybody and just trust them that they will
Right.
fix it, right? So the brand and the dealer's reputation is still going to be very important when you want to trust your car with the service. And I think that's where a lot of I see that still being the area everybody wants to improve in. So marketing for service, buying cars through service drive, these are the areas that we're still seeing a heavy demand in terms of data and also solutions.
And Prasad, just to follow up on that, there's been a great awareness, especially in the last 2 years, it seems, more and more on that service drive as being the source for these acquisitions, the one owner, or at least the the vehicle that's been serviced at the dealership where we have all the records, where we can put it up on the lift, where we can't do that necessarily online or at an auction. We can look at the vehicle and we can see what the recon needs are. And that service drive is a gold mine for the entire dealership in whole. Okay, sales and service, it all comes down to that drive and big awareness on that.
Yes, especially when if they're waiting for their car, they're
Yeah.
just right there in the dealership. And if you can convince them the technology is so changing so much, and for very little money they can get into a new car, I mean the chances are pretty high. So I think a lot of people are aware of it, service drive acquisition, but I've seen a very few people really pull it off to the maximum possible efficiency. So we definitely want to provide more data dealerships to kind of get more cars out of there.
Prasad Chavali, everybody, is the CEO of Axel Automotive. Um, Prasad, my final question today is: what are you seeing? What playbooks are you setting up in your implementations for fixed ops? What are you seeing out there? Here we are. We're halfway through, almost halfway through the second quarter in May. What are you seeing out there as we look ahead over the balance of the year? Because there's a whole lot of 2026 ahead, and nobody can see the future, but you've got a good idea with that data, and some of the things that we're going to be needing.
Techs are always at the premium. They're looking for how much money we're making, the tech efficiency, all these numbers that everybody pays, talks about it. So they give us a playbook and say, I want my advisor to log in and see these things really quick. Am I making enough appointments? What should I be making? What is the no-shows? Is anybody following up? Things that are people used to talk about. People say that if you can give us a platform that they can get this data very quickly, then I can make them focus on things they do best, which is go talk to the customer and sell more things on the on the service side. So what we're seeing is people don't want to do things that are manual anymore. They think that AI will take care of some, which it is taking care of some, but not everything, right? Repetitive tasks definitely, but also you need to be very uh, aware of everything is happening. All the small changes I did, is it helping me immediately or in the long term? And the only way to do it is data. So we are getting a lot of more demand for metrics that I was not aware of before. So like how many tires are we selling? Why is that important, right? It's like it's a loyalty to the dealership. Who's on my service drive doing more accessories to my customers, right? What are the CSI scores doing? So to answer your question, everybody's like looking for more data and then want it right in front, so that they don't want to spend time on trying to get access to this data. And then they want every positions to be fed the data points that they need to be looking at, right? Advisor needs to look at something, BDC need to look at something, and the guy in charge needs to be looking at something else, and we're creating those views for everybody.
Sarah, data is king, and Axel Motive gives dealers more control of that data and puts it in one place to help them with these operational efficiencies and great things happening, Sarah.
It's very exciting, Ted and Prasad. It'll be exciting to see how dealerships continue to take control of more of their data and make these kinds of incredible operational decisions.
Yes, definitely. And we're glad to be part of it. And if they want to know more about what everybody's looking at, what kind of a questions they're asking the AI, we're glad to share and give a quick run through that.
Everybody, Prasad is a great colleague and friend of many in the industry who look to him. Everybody, Prasad Chavali at Axel Automotive. You could see his email scrolling down below. You see the URL for Axel Automotive as well. You can reach them on the web. I know they're active on social media. Prasad, I would imagine if our audience has some questions, which, as you said, many dealers do, most dealers do right now, they can reach out and perhaps ask those questions of you and your team and
Yeah,
get some
directly.
guidance.
No obligations. We're here to kind of share what we're learning, and we would like to get other industry experts that you guys talk to, get the insights from there too. It's a mutual benefit.
All right, great stuff. Everybody, Prasad Chavali, CEO at Axel Automotive, here with us today at the Fixed
All right.
Ops
Thank you,
Roundtable.
guys.